Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the live Q&A with me, Professor Michael Scott. It is Thursday, the 31st of January. Where did January go? If you're the proud owner of a Professor Michael Scott calendar for 2019, it's time to turn over the page to the next calendar day. Here we are. Where are we in February? We're in Priene in Turkey for February. So tomorrow you get that chance to turn over to one of my favourite places in the ancient world. Here you go. Thank you very much for joining me on this Thursday, this cold, cold Thursday. I hope you're well wrapped up and warm and have been keeping out of the worst of the chill. Hello, Pedro. How are you doing? Thank you so much for tuning in and joining us today. We've had, as always, some absolutely fantastic questions from you. Hi, Shane. How are you doing? Thank you so much for joining in. Great questions that are coming in across a huge range of topics. So we're going to try and get through as many as possible. Hello, how are you doing? Kind of the meeting just finished in time. Here you are. Great that you could join us. Denise, hello. Debbie, hello. Patricia, hello. How are you doing? Happy Thursday to you all. Hi, Laura, how are you doing? Great that you could join us. So we're going to kick off with a question I've been meaning to get to for a couple of weeks. So my apologies. This one keeps falling off as we get sidetracked talking about all the amazing things we talk about. This one came in from Vittorio Maniscalco. Apologies if I haven't quite pronounced your name correctly. Vittorio Maniscalco. How powerful was Akragas amongst the cities of Greater Greece? Now, Akragas, where are we talking about here? That's the Greek name for one of the colonies that ancient Greece, that Greece set up across the wider Mediterranean world of what is known as Magna Graecia, Greater Greece. And Akragas is in Sicily, and it is known better by the Italian name and the Roman name for the town, which was Agrigento. Hello, Maria. Hello, Deborah. How are you doing? Salve, everyone. Hello. Thank you for joining us. So Vittorio is asking about how powerful was the colony of Agrigento, or Akragas, as the Greeks called it, amongst the cities of Greater Greece. Well, this is a place that was founded, it's a sort of second level, if you like, colonial foundation, because it was actually founded by another colony that had been founded by people coming from central Greece. So Akragas was founded in the 580s BC by the nearby colony of Gela. And it became, through the 5th century BC, an extremely important and powerful place. Hello, everyone. Hello. Greetings from Akragas. Are you there? Daniela, you're in Akragas. You're in Agrigento. Here we go. We're talking directly about your city right now, Agrigento. I hope many of you may have visited the place while you've been on tours of Sicily. It's an absolutely fantastic spot. And, of course, most well known for the Valle dei Tempi, the Valley of the Temples, the fabulous temples along that promontory ridge that we'll come to talk to in a second. So, Akragas, was it a powerful place? Yes, indeed. Through the 6th century BC and the 5th century BC, it was an extremely important, rich, wealthy, powerful city that really put itself on the map amongst the wider Greek world until the end of the 5th century, when it was actually taken and captured and ruled over not by the Greek world, not independently, but by the Carthaginians, that great group of sailors, traders, and military fighters who would come to threaten Rome in a century or two's time. So the 6th and 5th centuries are the key times for Akragas, for Agrigento. And there are two things that I kind of bring out about this place, the stories that are told. One is about one of its legendary tyrant rulers. So this place wasn't a democracy in its earliest phases. It became a democracy for a period of time in the 5th century BC, but actually one of the stories comes from its era when it was a tyrant ruler from Chile. Alvaro, lovely that you can come and join us. Thank you so much indeed for tuning in from Chile. So Akragas, and we are talking about Agrigento, the time when it was ruled by a tyrant in the 6th century BC, and this tyrant was a guy called Phalaris. Now, the story that's told about him, some of you may know, is that he had a bronze bull cast, and it was an extremely intricate piece of kit, and it was not just meant to be a rather pretty bull to have as a statue around, because when you put a fire under this thing, it seemed magically to make the bull come alive, and suddenly the bull would not only be spouting steam, but be uttering a great bellow noise as if the bull had himself come to life. How was this achieved? Well, not by magic, but by some very clever craftsmanship, and the rather macabre idea that when you actually put somebody inside the bull and then lit a fire underneath them. Their screams, as they were roasted alive inside this bull, were muted through a system of pipes to come out of the bull's nose as if it was the great bellow of the bull himself. And who was the first person, supposedly, according to the stories, to be put inside the bull? But the master craftsman who had made it, so that no one could create something as extraordinary ever again. And the tyrant Phalaris, that nasty tyrant ruler, all tyrants had to have stories told about them by the 5th century BC that turned them into nasty people. This is Phalaris, that he had a bronze bull that he would roast people alive in and then get people to watch and marvel as this bull seemed to bellow, which was in fact the disguised screams of those inside. Judith, you're clapping. Oh dear, don't tell me you'd like a bronze bull to put an occasional person in to roast them alive as well. I hope none of us would want to do that too much often. Latifa, how are you doing? Hello, you're going to catch up later on. Nice to see you. Thank you so much for dropping in. We're coming back to your question, Latifa, about mental health in a little while, so do tune back in. So that's Phalaris. That's the tyrant of Akragas. But on the other hand, the thing we know and the thing we go and visit about Agrigento now are obviously the Valley of the Temples, those fabulous temples stretching along the promontory ridge. Oh, you're waving. Hello, Judith. Okay, not waving and clapping. Okay, good. That's good to see. So the Valley of the Temples. Now, these are mostly temples that are constructed actually in the 5th century BCE. So during the era when Akragas stops being a tyranny and starts being a democracy, and they're temples to a whole host of great Greek gods, but actually they're mostly known, in fact, by their Roman names, the gods by their Roman names, because, of course, Akragas would go on to become the important Roman site of Agrigento. So you've got a temple to Concordia, to peace, to Juno, Himera, to Heracles, and of course then to Olympian Zeus, as well as Castor and Pollux and Vulcan, to Hephaestus, the temple to Hephaestus, 5th century. But the temple to Olympian Zeus is the one that really strikes you, I think, when you go there. And if you get a chance to go to Agrigento, please make sure you make a beeline to see the temple of Zeus, of Olympian Zeus, because it is simply ginormous. You both have to go and see the site, see the remains of the temple on the site, and then you must go to the museum at Agrigento, and you go through to where they have models of the temple of Olympian Zeus and also part of the real thing now brought inside. Now, the two things to see on the outside are one of the Telamon figures that's lying on the ground. Now, these are figures that are sort of, with their hands up like this, they're sort of supporting the weight of the world above them, and they were sort of interspersed with columns. So the temple was designed to have a column going a full height, and then in between that column and the next column, a wall going half height, and then this Telamon figure going the rest of the height. But if you see one of the size of one of these Telamon figures, and then you think that's only half the height of the building, you are absolutely spellbound by the size of this thing. When you go into the museum, you can see the model of the whole building as it was, and then you can stand in front of one of the Telamon figures upright. And when I stand there, I don't even come up to halfway up its calf, let alone the rest of the figure. It towers over individuals. Exactly, like Atlas. Absolutely, that kind of idea that they're holding up, exactly, Telamon figures like Atlas, they're sort of holding up the world on their shoulders. This temple was 30 meters high, 30 meters high, constructed out of solid stone. And its width and its length, it was 53 meters wide by 110 meters long. That is the size, effectively, of a football pitch. So we are talking about one of the most ginormous temples ever constructed in the ancient Greek world, right here at Agrigento, which absolutely towers, or would have towered over everything around it. And it was built to celebrate a victory over the Carthaginians that Akragas was absolutely central to, kind of during the 5th century. And that, of course, must have had a rather ring of irony to it when Akragas finally fell to the Carthaginians at the end of the 5th century BC. So that is absolutely a must-see if you go to Agrigento. The other temples look pretty. There's more of them standing, but make a beeline in my book for the Temple of Olympian Zeus and marvel at the sheer mastery and craftsmanship that it would take to build such a thing. And you often see this, that at the outer margins of the ancient Greek world, you see some of its biggest temples. And this is often explained by the theories of identity kind of proclamation, that if you are at the center of a community, you don't have to work very hard to claim yourself to be a member of it, because you obviously are. You're right at the epicenter. But if you're right there at the margins, potentially falling off the map, as it were, of a particular community, you're much more likely to shout loudly, much more clearly, and do more to try and make sure that your membership of that group is clearly stated. And one of the things you could do to make sure that you were obviously a member of the Greek world was build big Greek temples. So you often find in Sicily and southern Italy, if we were to look in North Africa, or we were to look at the Greek colonies of Asia Minor, the Black Sea, kind of often more magnificent architecture than you even find in the centre of the ancient Greek world in places like Athens or Delphi. So Akragas absolutely takes the biscuit in that sense. So well done, Akragas, absolutely fantastic stuff. And thank you very much indeed for your questions. How could they build something like this without modern machines? Sounds like Baalbek. Absolutely, Baalbek's another great example from the Roman era rather than the Greek. But Baalbek, if you ever get a chance to go in modern-day Lebanon, is again an absolutely stonking site, which has the biggest, at Baalbek, they have the biggest single block of stone that's been carved anywhere in the Roman world. To the extent that, well, in fact, the two biggest, I think. One, the biggest, they seem to have carved it out of the quarry and then realised that it was too big for them actually to move. So it's still there kind of in the quarry. And then a second one that they did actually manage to move, a little bit smaller, and is up against kind of as part of one of the temple walls of the great Roman temples at Baalbek. So Baalbek, absolute must see if you can get to Lebanon and go and see that site. Beautiful, extraordinary temples. Again, part of that idea that kind of in this era those communities are shouting loud, but equally in the Roman era you've got emperors who are keen to outdo their predecessors, and there are two great ways of doing that. One is to go and conquer something new and expand the boundaries of the Roman Empire. The other is to build something bigger and more impressive. So again, there's that kind of different emphasis pushing construction in the Roman world. Daniela, Heracles was the most special temple of Akragas because of its Doric origins. Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. So there are probably more important temples in terms of the gods being worshipped to do with Akragas' history and its mythology and where its original founders came from. I completely agree with you, Daniela. But in terms of shouting loud, particularly about their victory over Carthage, the great Greek enemies of the West, at the same time as the Greeks were celebrating all their victories over their great enemies in the East, the Persians, kind of the Temple of Olympian Zeus, I think, is absolutely without parallel. Well, thank you very much indeed for those questions. Thank you. That was absolutely fantastic, Victoria. I'm so glad that we managed to get to answer your question at last. Now, we've got another one coming in from Valentine Laurent. How best to keep up to date with recent classics discoveries and publications? Well, great question. And it's one of the things that we struggle to do as academics half the time, is keeping up with everything that is being discovered. We do that mostly through reading the different academic journal articles that come out, the book reviews that come out, trying to keep up with the latest publications, as well as subscribing to things like the Classicists list, which is run out of Liverpool. If the Classicist listserv run out of Liverpool University, so if you Google for that, you can join that list. Lots of people make announcements on that list about seminars happening in different university departments, as well as different projects and also jobs coming out. But I think it isn't a difficult one if you're not kind of within the academic world, how you keep up with the latest finds. I mean, obviously we do our best here on the Facebook page, facebook.com/Michael Scott Academic. We try and post all about what's going on the latest finds, and we'll be talking about a few as well in this Q&A in a second, so keep tuned to that. I think also one of the best increasingly is Twitter, because a number of archaeologists, individual archaeologists, but also archaeology teams, particular research projects are having their own Twitter accounts, and so they then tweet out about their latest finds, and you don't need to follow every single one of them, because often then if you follow some key classicists, they'll be retweeting that information as well. So that's a great way to keep abreast of the latest finds, and it's something that I use as much as everyone else does. So absolutely brilliant. Also think about getting the latest magazines, BBC History Magazine, History Today, Archaeology Magazine, kind of as well. They do some great insights into what's going on around the world, kind of thing. Have they found Cleopatra's burial site? Asked Isabel. Well, they claim to have done. Yes, they claim. They're tantalising us with small details of what's happening, slowly revealing what might or might not have been found. So it's a good question of watch this space for a little while, Isabel, I'm afraid, on that. So Valentine, thank you very much indeed for that question. And we've another one in from Maria Marku about, have you ever considered, Michael, to write fiction about the classical period? I have not written any fiction about the classical period, but I am currently writing a sort of book for younger children that's working with a company to kind of really aiming at Key Stage 2 and Key Stage 3 learners, talking about the ancient Greek world. So I'm very excited to be sharing that with you in the next couple of months, I hope. So that's great fun, but it's not quite fiction, and there are some brilliant writers out there, Caroline Lawrence, Harry Sidebottom, or Amanda Scott, already writing great fiction about the ancient world. So maybe something I might turn my hand to in the future, but I haven't done so yet. But if you have any good ideas, kind of if you want to collaborate on something, then let me know. It would be great to kind of have a think and work with you on that. So we have time to stop very briefly to go and do In the News, Classics in the News, as I promised, and Classics What's On. So we got a couple hanging over from last week that we didn't get a chance to talk about. From Archaeology World, first ever find in Egypt, a 4,000-year-old funerary garden. So this is extraordinary for its date, but also the idea of it being having found a funeral garden. We're used to finding the burial grounds and perhaps the associated architecture around that, but here this is a funeral garden where ancient worshippers grew plants believed to help the deceased in the afterlife. So it's all part of the very rich tapestry of what the Egyptians felt that you needed in the afterlife in order to have an enjoyable afterlife. We've known that they existed, we've had some depictions of them, some artistic depictions of them, but we've never actually until now found one. So have a look for that. The link will be on our Facebook page. Then we've also there's a new explanations coming out for Alexander the Great's death. Now this is one of the great mysteries of the ancient world. In 323 we know Alexander the Great dies in Babylon, and he seems to be suffering from fever, and he goes into sort of a very steep decline and drops off the edge and dies. And people have said, is it poison? Is it overindulgence in alcohol? Did he have some kind of incredible disease that he'd been harbouring that just broke out and took him down at the last minute? But Dr. Catherine Hall, a senior lecturer at the Dunedin School of Medicine, believes that he didn't die from infection, alcoholism or murder, but instead, thanks to the neurological disorder, and I'm going to mispronounce this, Guillain-Barré syndrome, or GBS. So there we have it, a new kind of idea to add to the mix of what possibly brought together in the end one of the greatest conquerors of the ancient world, someone who changed the face of the ancient world. Maria, full of ideas but no time. Okay, yeah, I completely understand that. I can see where you're coming from. If you have a moment to talk, then that would be great. Hello from Siena, Richardina. Great that you could join us. Thank you so much for joining in. And we've also found, talking about coming from Siena, well, at least from Italy, off the coast of Portofino in Italy, Roman shipwrecks have been found carrying Gallic amphoras. So two scuba divers are going about their business, found the remains of an ancient ship and the ancient cargo that seemed to have been dropped into the Mediterranean Sea, dating back to sort of 1st century AD, something like that, 2,000 years old. Will be, again, there'll be more coming out about that in the near future, I hope, but for the moment the links will be on our Facebook page to talk more about that. And we've also got a couple of things to talk to you about what's on. Oh, there's one more thing I wanted to point out to you in terms of in the news. This has come up just recently. It's on my Twitter feed, and we'll hopefully move it over to the Facebook page today or tomorrow. Hello, Anthony. Hello. Have you seen the reconstructed faces of different peoples surviving from the different histories and ages of Britain? So this is a great find, including those from Roman Britain. They've taken skulls as they've been found, and they've done that kind of amazing job of putting back what they seem to be, first the muscles and the different layers of tendons, and then finally the skin, to be able to give you an impression of what it would actually look like to look at a Roman Britain of one sort or another, and then also from different periods of British history. So it really is an idea, a moment where you can stare into the face of our long since departed ancestors and people that once walked across the very paths that we may be treading, which is always kind of sends a shiver up and down my spine. So have a look out for that on the Facebook page as well. Staring into the eyes and the face of those of Britain's past. And then 2 times half-term activities coming up to mention, 2 half-term activities, both up at Vindolanda, a fantastic site that I can't get enough of up near Hadrian's Wall. The first on the 19th of February, it's going to be a 1-hour workshop using stop-motion animation for Lego, involving Lego Roman soldiers. Now, we know how much I like my Lego, particularly since I was honoured enough to be turned into a little Lego figure, which I showed you last week. But for ages 7 to 11, it's free to attend. recommend you just book your place by emailing info@vinderlander.com, and you can find out more about that on the Vinderlander Facebook page, and also we've got the links on ours, and also the real and replica finds handling, so you can get your hands on stuff. Absolutely, this is from the 18th to the 21st of February during half term, where you'll be using some 3D holograms, so magical digital technology to bring the ancient world to life, as well as bring out some replicas and some real stuff that kids can get their hands on. And then finally, if opera is your thing, between the 11th of February and the 7th of March here in London at the London Coliseum is Akhenaten, right? Kind of a fantastic opera. Freddie McDermott's award-winning production of Glass's opera returns to the ENO there, and tickets are from as little as £20. So this is really worth doing. So it's Glass's trilogy, which kind of works across the fields of science, particularly focusing on Einstein, politics, thinking about Gandhi, but then also thinking about religion, focusing on the Egyptian pharaoh Akhenaten. So there we go, well worth getting into. We're mixing those wonderful cultures across ancient history all the way through to opera. And of course, opera itself, the origins of opera, come from the kind of misreading and the misunderstanding of ancient Greek tragedy, because there they were studying ancient Greek tragedy, thinking that the entirety of ancient Greek tragedy was sung, rather than just the choral odes, and as a result they created opera. There we go, a kind of a homage, if you like, even if a mistaken one, to ancient Greek tragedy. But thank God we've got another amazing art form as a result that I absolutely love when I get a chance to go and see it as well. The ENO was where I went to see my first ever opera, and I've been a fan ever since, so hopefully you can get in there and be absolutely brilliant. Dear Danielle, from You Should Organise a Historical Reenactment of the Battle of Himera. Wow, okay, well, we might need some help on that. Certainly quite a few extras would be needed. The Battle of Himera, that key battle between the Greeks of the West, we're going back to those Greeks in Sicily, places like Akragas and others, facing off against the Carthaginians, the big kind of enemy to the west. And of course, if you go to the site of Himera today, it is an absolutely fantastic archaeological site. Not only have they got a brilliant new museum, where when we were doing the programs about Sicily, we went to this new museum and they have some of the skeletons of those who died in the battle. And I have never had sort of more spine-tingling experiences than when I'm handling the bones of those who died in this battle. And they've still got the arrowheads embedded in their spines and in their feet, in the bones of their feet and of their spine, from the weapons that killed them. You are literally holding people in the hands and seeing kind of how they died. But they also have the great remains, the temples that were constructed to commemorate the victory of the Greeks after that moment as well. So Himera for me is an absolutely must-see site as well. Make sure you get there if you can. From Manila, Ruth, hello from Manila, my lord. Okay, so we're going from Chile to Manila via the UK, a couple in Italy. Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us from Manila. It's a great pleasure to have you all here for this live Q&A with me, Professor Michael Scott. So hopefully that's given you a taste of the wide range of things that's on. We'll have to look for something classical in Manila for you, Ruth. Hopefully, are you there for a long time, or are you there just briefly? Kind of either way, we'll try and find something going on in Manila as well that we can talk about for you that's in the news. So, mental health. I said that I wanted to talk about this question. It came in from Latifa Walker a week or so ago, talking about mental health. We'd been talking a couple of Q&As ago about the sense of duty, honour, shame that really kind of guided the moral code, if you like, of the ancient Greeks. And her question responding to that was, what kind of sense did they have of mental health and well-being and of mental illness, and kind of how did they respond to that? It's a really, really interesting question. In the Greek world, there is a tendency to equate these kinds of issues where we get a sense of them in the sources with the influence of the gods, that this is the gods affecting particular people. Indeed, sometimes even kind of even just having a very strong mental impulse to want to go and do something would be ascribed to having your own sort of little god inside you. So famously Socrates, when he's asked, why is it that he continues to be such quite an annoying gadfly, as he's often described, kind of on the hide of the Athenian society and always posing these awkward questions. His response to that is to say that he has his own daimon, his own kind of little divinity inside him that's kind of turning him what to do, forcing him to go and do things. So we see quite a lot of that, and we also see instances where you see that concept of shame pushing people off the edge, as it were, so strongly that they go and commit suicide as a result. So famously, Sophocles Is Ajax, one of the great surviving Greek tragedies. There, the hero Ajax, who has been sent mad briefly by one of the goddesses, and while he's trying to go and actually challenge and kill another Greek hero, the goddess kind of misguides him into killing a whole bunch of sheep. And then when he realizes what he's done, the shame of it is so great, and that he cannot bear to live with himself and to face up to the community around him with that shame for that dishonor, and so he kills himself. And it's one of the most dramatic moments of Greek tragedy, because very unusually you're seeing a death happen kind of in front of you. The final speech before he falls on his sword is played out right there in front of you. So we do have kind of examples in the Greek world where kind of concepts such as duty, honour and shame do push people through to the extremes of suicide. We also hear a little bit about kind of how mental health is considered to have been affected. That changes over time, so as you get through into later periods and you get more medical writings, you get to the medical writings of Galen, for instance, they've moved away from ascribing it simply to that of gods, and it's moved more towards the influence of particular humours in your body that are unbalancing you in one form or another, and the idea of kind of, that was then very prevalent for centuries after, the idea of kind of having your body in balance and the different humours in balance. But that idea of ascribing mental difficulties to the gods is quite common practice across a number of different ancient communities. You could imagine the same in Mesopotamia. You can see it in fact, early Hindu culture in India as well. So the great Hindu epics or Vedic epics of the time, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, kind of both have examples of people suffering what we would consider to be mental distress and mental anxiety and poor mental well-being, and that being ascribed to well, if you like, agents of the divine. And then the big exception, I guess, in a way, is China, because China, evidence for considering and identifying mental illness actually dates back to roughly around 1000 BC. And there, the response seems to be, from the get-go, to treat this with herbs, with acupuncture, with different kinds of what we would now call therapy, rather than simply ascribing it to the influence of any kind of divinity. So seeing it as a problem which has, if you like, a solution within human control. And what's really also interesting is that the Chinese seem to be one of the earliest cultures to also be thinking about mental health as being impacted by things that happen to you in your life around you, things like trauma. So if you've been through a particularly traumatic experience, they have that concept and understanding that that might have a lingering after effect that may well impact on your mental health more well kind of over time. Hello Evie, Professor, how is little Michael? The Lego friend, yes, little Michael is very well. He's up in Warwick kind of holding the fort while I'm down here in London today. And Isabel, thank you very much. Does mental health issues increase with colder climate, less daylight and community life? I mean, that's often been shown to be in modern scientific studies, hasn't it? That if you go to, for example, northern Canada, to the native Inuit tribes in northern Canada, there, the schools that are there force kids to spend at least a couple of hours kind of standing in front of those sort of fake sun lamps to be able to make sure that they get enough vitamin D, because of the connections that have been found between poor exposure to sunlight and mental well-being. I don't know if we've been able to prove that for the ancient world, and whether there's just enough evidence to be able to sort of assign percentages of mental well-being and mental health issues to different ancient cultures. But it would be my bet that it was, although we have to put that in the context of the fact that life was much harder in very different ways back in ancient life, kind of in terms of your day-to-day existence, your ability to find and provide food, kind of the stresses and strains that we consider so much today contributing to ill health, whether it be too much media technology, too much use of the phone, over-stressful lives, not enough physical exercise, all of these kind of things that we know to be so important in maintaining health and well-balance, wouldn't have been so much problems for the ancient world, but instead we can imagine kind of a lot of other difficulties and stresses and strains coming with actually just day-to-day survival, perhaps taking precedence. And one of the interesting things as well, we were talking about the Delphic Oracle in previous weeks, and one of the interesting things that happens sometimes is a mistranslation between cultures to do with state of mental well-being. So the Delphic oracle in the Greek sources is often talked about being in a state of mania. Now mania, if you translate it in the Greek terms, is really it's more like a trance. It's more like they are inhabited by a divine spirit. In this case, Apollo, as they make they are the conduit between the human and divine worlds. But when the Romans came to that, what seems to have happened is that they've understood that word much more when it's transliterated across into Latin. They've understood it much more in similar to our term manic, and they've understood it much more as a sort of prophetic frenzy of mental instability. And many have argued that is why the Romans tended to prioritize and think about the way in which the Delphic oracle worked to be much more about this prophetic kind of frenzy of breathing in these gases and then going into this kind of uncontrolled state, where actually before the Roman era you hear very, very little about the Delphic oracle being in any kind of uncontrolled frenzy at all. And that's the picture of the Delphic oracle that has stuck with many of us through to modern world. So here we seem to have had a misunderstanding due to the transliteration of a term through cultures, through languages, which is actually centered around the understanding of their mental state and their mental well-being. So a really interesting case where cultures clash, and that misunderstanding has led to a kind of much more sort of permanent understanding of the Delphic oracle than that is probably quite misguided. So thank you very much. Our time is at an end already at 4:30. Thank you so much for your wonderful questions. Sorry for those I haven't got a chance to get round to, but we'll get round to them next week. Next week, Thursday the 7th of February, I'll be here 4 o'clock, and I have a special announcement for you next week. So hopefully you can tune in and join in there from places such as Chile, Manila, as well as from Dorset, we saw kind of just recently, as well as Italy and other great places around the world. Have, in the meantime, a wonderful rest of the week. Stay nice and warm, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend and a great start to next week. And I look forward to seeing you Thursday, the 7th of February, 4 p.m. for the next live Q&A with me, Professor Michael Scott. Keep your questions coming in, as always, to the Facebook page or via email to michaelscottacademic@gmail.com, and we look forward to answering them in the weeks to come. Take care of yourselves and have a great weekend.